Hey guys, and welcome to the DH Pickleball Show. My name is Mike Behrens. Happy to be back with you this week for episode 8, where we're going to talk about pickleball paddle progression and how David has progressed from where he started to where he's at now. So, as you can see on the screen, I got my man David Henry here to talk about his pickleball journey. That's what this show is about. He shares his tips and tricks and all the things that he does to chase his journey of becoming a senior pro. The last episode, I screwed that up. I just tried to say he was chasing to be a pro, but we can all tell he's going for the senior pro. So anyway, David, how are you, man? It's good to see you.
Hey, I'm doing well, still as gray as ever. I don't think I'm going to be able to reverse that trend. I think it's just going grayer and grayer, but I'm doing extremely well. How about you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I would just like to bring a little humor to the beginning of the episode.
For sure. I love it.
Dive into the content of what we're doing and talk about some pickleball paddles and stuff.
You got it. I love it.
Oh, that's great. All right. So in this episode, last week's episode, we talked about some camps and some trainings and things. So everybody go back and check out the previous episodes. There's been some good stuff that we've put out, some really great content. What we're going to talk about today, though, is the pickleball paddles that you started with and where you're at now and how you've progressed and why you choose what you choose. And we'll get into that a little bit. And so I'm excited about this because, as we know, I don't know much about pickleball and I'm still in the early stages and I'm learning everything I know from you. So I'm excited to hear about your pickleball progression. Now, for those of you who haven't listened to episode 1, David tells a very, very funny story about how he jumped into pickleball, bought some paddles, hated it, and got rid of the paddles. So let's start there. What were those paddles and why did you buy them when you first tried pickleball?
Yeah. So they were Selkirk Vanguard Power, the Invikta shape. There's different shapes of the paddles. That was the Invikta shape. But really, the reason I bought those was I didn't know anything about pickleball at the time, and I knew two things. I knew there was this pro named Tyson McGuffin, and he's big time pro now. But I knew there was this guy named Tyson McGuffin who seemed like a pretty cool pro, and I knew he used paddles from a company called Selkirk.
That's fair enough.
That's about all I knew. So I'm looking at Selkirk, and they were just getting ready to release their brand new series of paddles, the Vanguard series, and so the Vanguard Power is what the one I selected, and at the time those were probably the most expensive or close to the most expensive pickleball paddles on the market. They were about $200 per paddle. Now, fast forward, over 2 years from that time. That was spring of 2021. And, there are paddles now selling, around the $330, $350 range. So 200 at the time was most expensive. Now they've just even progressed, just in a 2-year time frame beyond that. But anyway, so I bought two of the most expensive paddles at the time. And, the reason I selected it was really, like I said, it was Tyson McGuffin, Selkirk, and it was Selkirk's newest, most expensive. Sure. I equated most expensive with best, their best, their best paddle. And really the shape I got, I don't have them anymore. I'll get to that in a second. But the shape's similar. The shape was similar to this. It was a little bit more elongated than this one, but fairly long handle, fairly rectangular, elongated shape. And again, really that I chose the shape that Tyson McGuffin used. And so I really have no other reason than that. And so I got those paddles here at the house. I was super excited to get them. My daughter was home from college on spring break when the paddles arrived. My son was still finishing up high school, so he was here. So I grabbed the kids. We went to a local court, and they got out there and just started banging around like tennis, just standing at the baseline, hitting ground strokes. And it was a windy day, and I was treating it like tennis, and I absolutely hated it because, again, dead ball, the wiffle ball, dead ball, and then dead paddles compared to like a tennis racket where the tennis strings, they cup and absorb the ball and then spit it back out more like a trampoline effect. This doesn't have that. It's a dead flat paddle. So I absolutely hated it. I said, this is most stupid game ever. And so kids and I packed it up, went home, few days later, I took my son to a different set of courts. We played some singles. We just stood at the baseline, treating it like tennis, banging around, and it just wasn't fun. And so I said, you know what? I'm done with pickleball. I'm going to sell these paddles. My daughter was pretty good at putting stuff up on eBay, and so I handed her the 2 paddles and said, see if you can recoup some of this $400 that I spent on paddles. And fortunately, because these paddles were Selkirk's an incredible brand. Okay, it really are still up today. Incredible, one of the top brands in pickleball. Because Selkirk's such a great brand, because these paddles were brand new and in high demand, we were able to sell them really quickly. I think we got like a little over 100 for each paddle, so I recouped about half, of my investment, and I was done.
Yeah.
And so then, fast forward to 6 months later, as we've talked about, I took a lesson, and with a different paddle. We could talk about that next, but took a lesson and fell in love with the game, and realized that I was just being bullheaded, treating it like tennis, and didn't give it a fair shot at all.
So to Selkirk's credit, it certainly was not their fault that you hated the game of pickleball.
No. Heavens no. They make incredible paddles.
Sorry I'm laughing so much, but I just find that story very, very funny, that now, you tried a game for the first time and you hated it. And now you love it so much that we're doing a show about your pickleball journey. I just think it's the greatest thing. Oh, shoot. I think your microphone's muted right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah.
So okay. So Selkirk is not the reason that you hated pickleball and quit for a little while. And then when you came back to playing pickleball again, what paddle did you go with, and why not Selkirk again? Yeah.
So it was this one right here. I still have it. So Selkirk's, obviously we sold on eBay. So I don't have those anymore to show, but it was this Franklin Ben Johns paddle. So the reason I sold that paddle again, it was this shows how big of a deal professional sponsorships are to brands. Because since that time when I sold the Selkirks, I had learned also of a guy named Ben Johns. Ben is the #1 male player in the world right now.
Oh, okay.
He was at that time, and he still is. And so basically, Ben Johns used this Franklin paddle. So I'm like, well, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. But also because this paddle was much more reasonably priced. It was a $100 paddle. So that's why I was going a little more cautious, that I'm not going to go for the most expensive paddle in case I still don't like the game. So I went with a lower priced paddle. But I mean, I did give a little bit more thought to it, other than just because Ben Johns played with it, because I had done some research at that time and learned a little bit about it. And what it was that obviously this kind of long rectangle shape, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because the paddle's a little bit more narrow and not wider across this way, it has a little bit probably of a smaller sweet spot, and it's a little bit less forgiving. But because I come from, I think I said in maybe in episode 1, like, I wasn't born with a whole lot of talents, but one of the talents that I was born with was great hand-eye coordination. And so because my hand-eye coordination, because of my experience in tennis and table tennis, racket sports, paddle sports, I don't need a big sweet spot. I don't need a forgiving paddle. I can handle something like this. And so I like the elongated shape, and it gives me a little bit longer handle. I like this longer handle as well, because like I mentioned, I think in our last episode when we were talking about how I switched to a two-handed backhand. So this longer handle gives me a little bit more room to grip the two hands to hit that. So I like the paddle, the face, the shape of the face. I like the grip size, and then also I went with a 16 millimeter thickness paddle. Okay, so it's a little thicker than a lot of the traditional paddles on the market, and what that gives me is excuse me, more control, less power. So it's a little thicker. So it's got a thicker honeycomb core, polypropylene, I think polypropylene, inner core. So it's a little softer, a little more control based as opposed to power based, because I'm a strong enough, athletic enough dude that I don't really need the power to come from my paddle. I can generate I can generate power on my own, and I've always liked that with tennis as well. I like to play with more dead strings. Like I play with a copolyester string for a lot of times because I like to take big cracks at the ball and big full strokes, and I like to really just feel it. And if you're taking huge strokes and you've got a super powerful paddle, you're going to be flying balls long left and right. So I wanted much more of a control paddle, and I got that with the thicker 16 millimeter core. So it was a little bit more than just because Ben Johns used it.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you do like you did when you got the Selkirks? Did you get 2 paddles, 3 paddles? I mean, how many did you get when you got back into pickleball?
I did not. I just bought the one for the lesson.
Okay.
But then once I loved pickleball at that lesson and everything clicked, I'm like, I see how the game's played and everything made sense. I told you I signed up for a tournament. I never played before. I signed up with a tournament with my buddy, and so I needed a second paddle quickly, and so I ordered a second one. It's the exact same paddle. It's just a black face. It just came in. Just came in the white face and the black face. So I ordered a second one of that Franklin Ben Johns paddle, so that I would have 2 in my bag. I always want to carry multiple paddles of the exact same paddle, exact same swing weight, exact same grip, exact same weight and balance point, all that. But yeah, so I bought 2. So I had 2 of the Franklins.
Cool. So to flash back to some of our previous episodes about grip customization and things like that, when you got the Franklins, did you immediately start to customize them, or did you play with them for a few practices, tournaments and stuff before you jumped into the customizing?
Yeah, I customized them a little bit, but again, stupidly and blindly. So basically, Ben Johns had a video of how he customized his paddles and where he put the lead tape and where he put the weight. So I customized mine the same way, but and I didn't have the swing weight machine at the time. I didn't have the balance board, so I was just using a scale and following what he did. But over time, I got much more sophisticated with my paddle customization in regard to weight, balance, swing weight, and paddle matching. And so, no, I do it much differently now. But I did a little blindly, stupidly. I customized it a little bit.
Yeah, I was just curious because, starting back in and jumping back into it and being cautious with the amount of money you spent on it, would you take the time to really customize it? But are you giving it a fair chance if you didn't customize it too, I guess?
But actually with these 2 Franklins, that brings up an interesting point. So we talked in, episode
4 or 5, I think.
4. No, I think you're right. 4. You're better than me. 4 and 5, I think, is what it was on the swing weight and paddle matching, and how I like to have my paddles exactly matched from the specs. Yep. So when I reach in the bag, no matter which one I choose, it's going to feel the same. It's going to swing the same. It's going to play the same. And that's actually with these Franklins. That's where I learned, just by feel. Hey, these are the exact same paddles, exact same brand, exact same model, but they don't play the same. So when I was switching back and forth between these 2, I'm like, they just don't play the exact same. Sure. And that's really what started me on my journey of realizing that the specs out of the box are just not going to be the same, even if it is the same brand of paddle and same model of paddle. And then that led me to really, getting into customization and taking it to the whole, deep level that I do now with everything I do. Right. But yeah, that was what kickstarted it, because I'm like scratching my head saying they just don't play the same way. Yeah,
sure. Well, no, that's a good thing, and I think it was episode 4 and 5 where we really did a deep dive. Like in episode 2, we talked about customizing the grip and stuff, but 4 and 5 is where we really dug into the swing weight. And if you didn't listen or haven't watched those episodes, certainly go back and check those out, because as a complete novice to the world of pickleball, my mind was blown at how much goes into the customization of it and how you can really adjust your paddle and what the differences that you can do. So definitely go back and check that out. Okay. So
for sure.
So with the Franklin paddles, how long did you play with those before you moved into the Joola paddles?
Yeah, so I bought the first one. It was, like I said, when I took that lesson, it was a couple days before Thanksgiving of 21. And so I played with those probably all the way up and till maybe like March of 22,
Okay.
until the Joola paddles. And basically, and that that's what I currently use. But they Joola was they're a huge table tennis brand.
Hmm.
So I've known of them. We actually in our basement we have a Joola table. Is our table
Oh,
tennis table in our basement is a Joola table. So I knew of the brand Joola, and I had heard some rumblings just in the pickleball forums and stuff that Ben Johns was leaving Franklin and possibly partnering with Joola. That Joola was entering the pickleball space because they hadn't been. They'd been strictly
ah,
table tennis, and so it made a lot of sense because they've been making paddle. So I guess what I was thinking is that tennis brands are going to come flooding into the pickleball market because if they're making
sure.
rackets, they want to make paddles. Actually, a table tennis paddle is much closer to a pickleball paddle than a tennis racket is.
Sure.
So even though I wasn't even thinking like Joola and table tennis brands weren't even on my radar of who might enter the market, it makes a lot of sense that Joola came in because they've been making table tennis paddles for years, decades, and
Yep.
have all that expertise and R&D and knowledge. And so, it made sense. So, so that's when Ben Johns announced his partnership with Joola, and they
Got it.
released this Joola. This is the Ben Johns signature paddle, the Joola Hyperion CFS, which stands for Carbon Friction Surface, and the Ben Johns signature on the paddle. So yeah, that was probably March of 22 that paddle came out, and I ordered it right away when it came out.
Okay. So March of 22. So you've been playing with that since then.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
What did you think of it the first time that you I guess, what were the differences between the Franklin and that? I mean, what did you feel was different?
Yeah, so not a whole lot because again, Ben Johns is at the top of his game with Franklin, so he's not going to have Joola design a drastically
Yeah.
different paddle for him. So I knew it'd be pretty much the same. So I mean, top to bottom specs, 16.25 or 16.5 inches, 7.5 across. I mean, so all the specs were pretty much the same. There were three main differences. One was that more the arrow shape across the top, where this was more rectangular.
Oh yeah.
So that was one difference, was the design and a little bit more of an arrow curve. The second thing was you've got this honeycomb core underneath the paddle face that's in the center of the paddle. And then you've got this plastic edge guard that goes around the edge. I've got tape over mine, but you got this edge guard that holds everything together. What
Mhm.
Joola did is they sprayed this foam all around the edge of the inside of the honeycomb
Mhm.
to just soften it and give you a little bit more of a forgiving feel.
Okay.
Less vibration type of thing. So that was another big deal. And then the biggest deal probably of all was they were one of the early brands that went to the carbon fiber surface. So
Mm,
what these Franklin paddles were, they're a fiberglass surface. Okay.
got it.
So the difference is fiber. Well, obviously there's difference in material, but
Sure.
fiberglass, the performance difference is fiberglass is more poppy, a little bit more power. So the ball jumps off the fiberglass a little quicker, fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a
Yeah.
second,
Sure.
but quicker. Whereas the carbon fiber surface gets you a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second more dwell time. So the
Yeah.
ball, it doesn't pop up as fast. So you don't have as much power, but what you give up in power, you get more control and more spin producing capabilities.
Got it.
So I think we talked in a previous episode about how to hit a heavy ball. And a heavy
Yep.
ball is a ball that's fast but has a lot of top spin. Well, this carbon fiber surface, I listed out three factors to hitting heavy balls, heavy topspin. And the first was stroke mechanics, the second was swing weight, and the third was the surface of the paddle face. So that carbon fiber surface added a little bit to control, a little bit spin, a little bit more dwell time. So so those are the three main differences between the Franklin paddle and the Joola that hit the market in spring of 22.
Okay. And you've been playing with the Ola since March of 22. So do you plan on playing with them for a while, or are you looking to switch up? Like what are you thinking there?
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely love it, and I'm the type of guy like I think in my junior year of high school, which would have been about 1988, I switched to a certain racket. It was Prince Original Graphite, and I just loved it. And I stayed with that racket all the way through the rest of my high school, through college days, through early adulthood. I just, once I find something I like, I really don't like to make a whole lot of changes from that point. And so I really love this Joola Hyperion paddle. And so not ready. My game's just improving. So last thing I want to do is switch. But with that said, Joola just came out with a new Ben Johns at the beginning of the year. He switched to a new paddle from Joola. It was called Project Perseus, was the name of the test project as they were developing it. Excuse me. And then it just recently, about a month or so ago, it hit the market. And it's called Perseus, is the paddle, and it is it's a little different from the standpoint that instead of this arrow curve, it went back to the more traditional rectangle shape at the top of it. And then I think the carbon fiber surface, I think there's some differences to that it's actually a little bit more power, a little bit more pop.
Oh,
and I just don't necessarily want that right now. And
yeah.
I know it sounds stupid that, hey, if the number one player in the world wants that, why wouldn't you, David? But again, I'm just a creature of habit, and I just love the way I'm playing with this paddle. And it's I tried this one here, and it's a great paddle. It's from a real small up and coming company called Gaba, and it's called the Rogue. This paddle right here, from a spec standpoint, I think is super similar to the new Joola paddle, the Perseus.
Yeah.
Super similar. And I played with this Rogue. I had a friend of mine who reps them, and he gave me this paddle at his cost, sold it to me at his cost. So I got a good deal on it. And it's a really great paddle. But I noticed two things when I played with it. I know it sounds silly, but the difference in that arrow shape versus the rectangle, I could just feel a little bit more drag through the air. I could feel a little bit more drag that I just didn't like. And then this is a different, less gritty carbon surface, so it gives a little bit more power and a little less spin. And I just didn't want that. I love the spin that I get with mine and things like that. So tried it. Tremendous paddle. I'd highly recommend it to people, but just not for me. Because I just love the Hyperion so much. And the new Joola Perseus, don't quote me on it, but I want to say it retails for about $250 plus shipping, plus shipping, from Joola directly or from a retailer. I think it's priced at $250. And I'll keep this guy nameless, but I've got a contact, I think, who's a Joola distributor. He gives me a great deal. I don't think he's doing anything that he's not supposed to, but I'll still keep him nameless for that reason, just in case he is. But but he sells me these for $200 shipped.
Oh wow!
So to move to a paddle, I mean, that's $50 more per paddle. That's got some features that I probably don't want as much, and I've already got one that I love. I just can't justify switching at this point. And to be honest, I'll probably be playing with the Hyperion for a while, because that's just kind of how I am.
Well, I think one of the things that I've learned by hearing you talk about your game of pickleball is you're very in tune with how you play, like as an athlete and as someone on the court, and with your paddles, you're very in tune with that. And that's, to some people that might seem weird, but to me, that doesn't seem weird at all. I mean, I used to be a thrower in college, and I threw the hammer, and I can equate that the hammer was very, like, I could feel a difference in the grip of a hammer, or a difference in the handle, or a difference in the spin of the ball, and for people who aren't in that world, it's so foreign. But for me, like, I totally get what you're saying with the paddles. And if you're all in on the Joola right now, and your game obviously better than anyone, and you feel good about it, I don't care what the number one player in the world's playing. It's what's best for David, right? And so I think that's huge, and I think that's a big takeaway for people listening, that just because Ben Johns is playing with that paddle doesn't mean it's going to make you a better pickleball player and make you more in touch with your feel. I mean, you can still play good pickleball with a lesser paddle. And so that's really cool. I think that you're so in touch with that. And I appreciate you sharing that with everybody, because it's just a cool thing to
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that's just kind of how I am in life. I like a buddy of mine at work. I mean, I'd mentioned before, I'm a VP of analytics, for a digital marketing agency. And one of my best friends at work and a coworker, like we always talk about what we call ATD, and it's called attention to detail. And we say a lot of times in the workplace, it's not the most intelligent person that we need in our role. We need someone with great ATD, attention to detail.
Sure.
And that's just kind of how I am in all aspects of life, including my pickleball paddles. And I forget, I may have shared this on a previous episode. They all blur together. But with this paddle, the GABA that I tried for my friend Joe, when I gave him the feedback that, hey, I love it, but it's just not for me. And I gave him the small nuanced differences that I noticed, the subtle differences. He kind of gave that same feedback. He said, man, I really appreciate the feedback. And he said, I'm just impressed that you're so in tune with your paddles and your game that you can recognize and feel those small differences. And I am, and I view it as a good thing.
No, totally. 100% is a great thing. So that's cool. So, okay. So that's kind of the history of your paddle experiences, and we're not changing that anytime soon. But let's talk about the paddle world right now. I mean, we talked about this, and while we were talking about what we were going to talk about on the show, you brought up the paddle market, and you've mentioned that, people are going to be coming in. You thought that tennis manufacturers were going to be coming in, and then it was the table tennis that decided to come in. And so what do you think is happening in the world of paddles? Is it going to become just flooded with stuff over the next couple of years? Where do you think it's going with that right now?
Yeah, it's a super interesting, fascinating topic, and I'm glad we're talking about it. It's already flooded, I would say. I mean, I don't have a count of how many different brands are out there, but there are all kinds of brands out there in the pickleball world now, in the paddle world, and just more and more coming all the time. I mean, I learn of new brands all the time. This GABA paddle, I just recently learned of them within the last couple of months. Never heard of them previously. And so there's all kinds that are coming on the scene, and it's not surprising. I mean, pickleball, fastest growing participation sport, in the U.S. the last 2 or 3 years in a row, and it's just people are flocking to pickleball because it's so much damn fun. But I would say the market's already flooded, so it's really going to be interesting to see what happens over the coming years. I think it's going to I mean, it'll probably continue to get flooded for a while, but then I could see it going the other way. So finally getting some mass consolidation where some big players will probably take market share, and kind of the little guys will, unfortunately, for better or for worse, might be weeded out a little bit. But it's interesting from the standpoint of, and I know I equate a lot of stuff on the show back to tennis, but I've got a lot of tennis years experience and background. And so when I was stringing tennis rackets, there were all kinds of different tennis string brands on the market, and the machinery to manufacture tennis string, it's just not everywhere. And, so there were probably a handful of factories throughout the world that made tennis strings. So there were all kinds of brands running through that exact same factory, and they're just slapping it in different packaging and putting different labels on it, and tweaking it slightly. And I got to believe the same's happening in pickleball. Now, pickleball paddles, it probably doesn't take as much of customized equipment to make the paddles. I mean, they're pretty basic when you break down a paddle, but I still believe that's the case. There's not hundreds upon hundreds of factories out there making pickleball paddles. There's probably a handful of them. And so a lot of times, this Joola paddle, again, I'm not saying I know anything. I don't have any background insider information, but very conceivable this Joola paddles being made in a factory that's cranking out other brands as well.
Oh, sure.
You know, and I know how that works. I worked with a buddy. He manufactured like high end bicycles, road and mountain bikes. And he had a factory in China that did contract manufacturing for him, you know, and the factories have engineers on staff in the factory. So you go to them and you kind of give them your design specs and how you want it to look, how you want to feel, and they make it up. And so, you know, I know the same thing is happening in the paddle space. And so the barrier to entry is so low, I think, you know, to create your own paddle brand, that's why you're seeing so many brands out there. But yeah, I got to believe that it's going to start getting consolidated a lot more. And I'm just looking at my notes here, you know, from a brand standpoint. And again, this is David Henry's gut feel opinion. You know, I don't have any contacts at any paddle brand. I don't know anything. But you know, like we'd mentioned, Selkirk.
Yeah.
Selkirk's here to stay. Like they got their footprint in the pickleball world super early. They manufacture just incredibly high end paddles, and a great range of paddles from beginner to pro level paddles. I mean, you know, they're here to stay. Joola, gotta believe they're here to stay. You know, deep pockets, great experience. You know, in the table tennis world for years and years and years. You know, they're good R&D. They've got great R&D. So, you know, companies like that'll stick around. You know, they've got the sponsorships matter. They have Ben Johns as their you know, top sponsored player. So that matters a lot. There's a company, I think they're in Michigan. They're called PaddleTech. They make just super high quality paddles, but they are a little bit of I would say a little bit smaller brand, from the standpoint of they're not like a massive company, probably with deep pockets and deep R&D, things like that. But what they have going for them, and I think it was just up for contract renewal fairly recently, they have the number one female player as their Annalie Waters. So she is a PaddleTech player. And when that contract was up, I heard it was up recently. I'm sure they went to great lengths to keep her. But a smart, if they did, sure, super smart move on their part, because you know, having her associated with your brand is powerful. But they make super high quality paddles, you know, so I think they'll be around. You know, Franklin, don't necessarily know. Franklin's just a huge brand in, like, they make like baseballs and baseball gloves, and I think they make basketballs and soccer balls and things like that. So, you know, they're probably a big enough company with some staying power, could stay around. You know, who knows? They've got a couple of the Georgia Johnson and J.W. Johnson, some top pro players, male and female, sponsored. So, you know, that Franklin will probably be here. Then there's some more niche brands like CRBN or Carbon. Or another one called Gearbox. Like Carbon was one of the first carbon face paddles, so they've got a really, really loyal following. And make great paddles as I understand it. And then Gearbox is more of what they call an edgeless paddle, so it doesn't have this like this plastic edge guard. It's more of just one piece material. So they've got a real loyal user base of people that like their you know, edgeless paddles. So, you know, there's things like that. And then it's just going to be super interesting to see, like, the big tennis brands, you know, so are they going to come in, you know? Well, like the biggest tennis brand right now is probably Babolat, and then Wilson, and then Head, and then maybe Prince are probably the big tennis racket brands. They all have a pickleball paddle. There is a Babolat paddle. Wilson has some paddles. Prince has some paddles. I think Prince paddles were actually manufactured by that PaddleTech company in Michigan that I mentioned. I think they made the Prince ones. And then Head has some paddles, but none of them have really gained traction. I just don't think the tennis brands have really gotten behind it yet. And so they could, some of them might decide to really get behind pickleball for their brands, and they could explode it and put some good R&D and some good money behind it. You know, we'll see what happens there. And then what's interesting, Adidas, the shoe and apparel brand, they have paddles. And then I mentioned in the previous episode that Riley and Lindsay Newman, that camp I took from them, they're sponsored by Takea water bottles. Well, Takea just got in the paddle game. So they just now came out with the Riley and Lindsay Newman signature paddles from Takea. So they're getting in the game. So yeah, it's just I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where it's going to go. I just know that consolidation at some point has got to happen. We may not have peaked yet from the number of brands, but we probably will soon. And then at some point, there's got to be some consolidation in the marketplace. But I just know it's going to be fun and interesting to watch and see what happens in the space.
That will be very interesting to see. It is. I mean, it's like anything. There's a gold rush right now in the pickleball world. There's lots of opportunity for brands to come in, and the ones that have been there and that have a loyal following and that serve the people right will probably have some staying power. The ones that don't serve the people will fall by the wayside. As they should. Maybe one day we'll have a David Henry signature paddle. Wouldn't that be cool?
I doubt it. Those are for the young gun pros, not the senior pros. I'm fine playing with this baby for many years to come.
I dig it. Okay. All right. Well, any other thoughts on the world of paddles and paddle progression and what's going on in the industry of paddles right now?
Yeah. Not so much. I mean, it's related. There's one thing I noted that we didn't talk about that I probably should have mentioned when I was talking about my Joolas. But it's also related. It's also related to the paddle industry. Is that so I actually probably coming. I think it's scheduled for Saturday delivery. I'm gonna have my fifth Hyperion coming.
Oh, nice.
To the house. Yeah, and they just wear out over time and things like that. And I'm hard on the edge guards. I'll scrape them against the cord a lot, and I'm hard on edge guards. And then sometimes carbon fiber face. When I'm hard on the edge guard, I'm hitting the corner a lot on the ground. Then you can start to get a few little cracks in the carbon fiber face. And so what I found, there's a company out in Mesa, Arizona. It seems like all roads lead to Mesa. We got X Endurance supplements out there in Scottsdale. We got the camp that I went to at Bellbank Park was out there in Mesa, and now I'm talking about a company out in Mesa called PaddleFix. But it's called PaddleFix LLC. It's run by a guy named Brett Warner. Brett's actually a really great singles pickleball player. And then another guy, Brett's more of the business guy, and then the other guy, Tracy Wallstad. Tracy, he's more of the engineer, the paddle fixer. And so I think I learned of these guys through a Facebook group, and so then I got in contact with Tracy. So once my very first Joola started showing some wear along the edge guard was cracking, and a little bit of the carbon face cracking, I was asking him, "Hey, can I send these to you? And can you fix them and repair them?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And kind of his their slogan is that they'll repair your paddle to better than new condition. Is what they say. And I mean they've fixed thousands upon thousands of paddles over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And so they fixed a few of mine. So so I ship them out to Tracy when they need a little bit of repair, and he'll put a brand new edge guard on there. He fixes the cracks in the carbon fiber. I don't know what he does to it, but he fixes that. He puts his own like custom grit on there. He's got actually a name for it. I think maybe like a grit 6 surface. I don't know. He's got some name for it. And he does a great job. One of the things with Joola paddles is they do start to wobble sometimes where the grip and the paddle face come together. Yeah. Now some of the newer paddles are putting it's called a unibody thermo piece of fiber where the carbon fiber actually extends down into the base of the handle, so it makes it a little more firm. But this paddle doesn't have it, and so sometimes Tracy he'll strengthen that a little bit for me, And then the first time I got a paddle back from him, he asked the right question. He said, "Are you left-handed or right-handed?" Because he was going to put an overgrip on there for me, and he wanted to make sure that he wrapped it with the correct orientation.
Oh, sure.
So I was impressed that he asked that. But from this point on, I've just told him, "Hey, don't throw an overgrip on it. I'll do it myself." Just because I'm so customize it. I am so damn particular with how I wrap my grips that he does a great job, but it's just not the way that I do it. So I've told him, don't even waste an overgrip on me. Just send it back with the bare handle, and I'll take it from there. But I did want to give a plug for those guys. It's like I said, PaddleFix LLC. There's just a great couple of guys, and they do great business. And again, with paddles getting up in prices of $150, $250, now $350 for paddles, if you can have something repaired for a fraction of that cost rather than buying a new paddle, it's well worth it, and depending on what I have done, I think Tracy charges me like 60 to 80 bucks,
Oh, wow.
depending on what services are done. It's well worth it to send paddles off to those guys. So definitely wanted to get that plug in there.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense to get them fixed. I mean, and then you just said that I guess that was one thing I didn't ask you, was how many paddles do you play with now? And you said you just got your 5th paddle coming. And so just remind, for people who haven't listened to the episode where you talk about it, why do you have 4 paddles and now a 5th paddle that you play with?
Yeah, I mean, it probably comes from my old tennis days of you wanted a lot of rackets in your bag because if you broke a string during a match, you wanted to have backups. Well, I probably don't need 5 paddles in my bag because it's not like you're going to break a string. So the chance of a paddle going bad is probably pretty small. But that's why. I mean, if I like to do my grip work at home when I can really focus on it. I don't want to be sitting courtside between matches at a tournament re-gripping a paddle. I want to do that at home. So that's one reason. So if a paddle gets too slick during a match and I need to switch, I know I've got a fresh one in the bag. I don't have to sit there in the court and wrap it. If a paddle would break, or would crack or something was wrong with it, I want to make sure I have backups, in the bag. And so, it's probably overkill. And I don't care all 5. I think one of my Joolas is just worn too much now that, it's just not even playable. So I don't carry 5 all the time now. But it is the 5th one I bought. But I generally carry 3 to 4 with me at all times.
Sure. No, I get it. I totally get it. I mean, it wasn't a judgment on you.
Oh no, I know.
I totally get it. Like it makes sense. I mean, if you're going to play a tournament, you want to make sure you have all the tools that you need, because if you don't have a paddle, then you're going to end up having to borrow somebody's, and who's going to let you do that, right?
Exactly. And then that's where, I know we hit upon it before and hit other episodes, but that's where that whole concept of paddle matching comes into play. So if I've got 4 of these Hyperions in the bag, I want them exact same specs, swing weight, balance, feel, everything, so that I can just grab any one of them out and I know exactly how it's going to play.
Yeah, exactly. And for people who are interested in that, go back and listen to episodes 4 and 5.
Yep.
Because David really does a deep dive in how he does that and what he does and all that kind of stuff. So it'd be great for you to figure out how he does that. So
sure.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, hey, I think that's a pretty good conversation about the paddle progression and how you've changed. I'm really glad that you've come so far from your days of the Selkirks.
Yes, sir.
I will continue.
I know you love that story.
So, all right. Well, with that said, David, hey, thanks for this week. Thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge and your insights into the paddle industry. It's always fun to have these conversations. And for those of you who are listening, always like, comment, subscribe, share the episode, trying to just help people have more fun and get better at pickleball with David's knowledge, because he's on that journey too. He's just trying to get better and sharing what he's learning, and we're having fun having these conversations.
For sure.
So leave us a review, ask David some questions, and we'd love to answer them on a future episode. Follow David to stay in touch with him in between episodes. DH Pickleball on Instagram. That's a great place to follow him. You can follow me, Big Mike Behrens. Links will be in the description, so you guys can do that. And with that said, thanks for tuning in to episode 8 of the DH Pickleball Show, and we will see you in the next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.